My example is this zine that I picked up at Frenchman Books in New Orleans, Louisiana, and it's called How to Plan for Action Protest Preparation. For those who don't know, a zine is usually just a short or a small booklet or pamphlet, usually self-published. This one is published out of a small publisher in Portland, Oregon. Usually these are associated with, underground movements, protest movements, counterculture, maybe literary movements, things like that. And they're usually available, on the streets or in independent bookstores. Um, One of the things that I think makes this a great example of technical communication is that it really considers the needs and the usability of the document for the intended audience. So, since it's intended for people who are potentially planning to go to a protest or a demonstration and may need to consider some of the information inside of it, you wouldn't necessarily want a long technical document online with a bunch of different links that you would have to find the link or find the file. Instead, what you would want is a handy little booklet that's 7 pages long that you could quickly find the information that you're looking for. You can also tell throughout, although there's some funny things, after the police, it's got some donuts, some sort of visual interest. The use of contrast, even in a black and white brochure or booklet like this, it breaks out different sections. And then, of course, the standard, all caps bold for the section headings and grouping things into related sections. So somebody on the go could pretty easily skim through this and get the main ideas. And if they wanted to dig down on any of those, they could read further. Another thing that I think makes this a great example of technical communication is that it considers the way in which an audience might actually want to use this in terms of planning and then going to and then dealing with the repercussions of a demonstration or a protest. So it starts with the first section being the basics, where it introduces the reader to some of the legality and regulations around what their rights are, where they can protest, where they can't protest. For instance, there's a section where you are legally allowed to assemble, which talks about being able to do that both in public and private spaces, but not on federal land like courthouses, what you're legally allowed to say. And then also some sort of gray area where, for instance, even if you're legally allowed to assemble, police can ask you to disperse if it becomes a threat or if they sense that it becomes a threat. Moving on from understanding the context and the legality, the next step is safety preparation. And so, maybe when people first think of, I'm going to go to a protest or a demonstration, they might think of, bringing a certain type of shoes. You see a lot of things like face masks and gas masks, but there's some other things in here that are sort of presented in a handy checklist or bullet list. The first one being form an affinity group and sticking together so that you're not alone. Another one, obtaining the phone number of legal support so that you have that ready to go in case things go sideways. So really practical things. Some of those things are things that people might think about or might not think about. And if you just put yourself in the shoes of somebody who might be planning to go to a demonstration, especially in a sort of a casual way, you may not be thinking through the realities of what that might end up looking like. And so having a very clear picture of this is what could happen and here's how you can prepare for it, that's very helpful for people. There is a section on what to expect if you're arrested. So let's say you deal with the police and things don't go well, what to expect if you're arrested. And this one's a little bit more narrative and it sort of describes what somebody would go through in the arrest process, but it's more informational and not really something you can do. As you can imagine, if you're in a situation where you are arrested, you don't have a lot of actions that you can take at that point. You've sort of exhausted your options and then you'll have more options later. So what this does is it sort of walks you through to be prepared. So sometimes, technical communication could be just preparing somebody for what to expect. This could happen in all sorts of technical documentation where sometimes there's a time for action and sometimes there's a time for just sitting back and understanding what's happening and being aware of what's going to happen next. And it even has a nice disclaimer here or sort of warning for people who are unable to protest, and says people with outstanding warrants and non-citizens are urged not to attend protests that could end in legal charges. So these sort of safety warnings, these cautions, these different contingencies are things that are helpful for people so that they know that they have options and that they're properly warned before they make decisions to act. And also I just want to zoom out and say, this was first published in 2000 and was republished in 2020. So it's always helpful with any sort of publishing, any sort of, cultural artifact. But also with technical communication, it's always helpful to consider the social and political context that it comes from. So obviously, the protests and demonstrations have always been a part of the American fabric and political engagement. But for those who were, in college and voting in their first election in the year 2000, that was a year with a lot of protests and demonstrations and a very divisive election at the national level, and then republished in 2020 with, one of the most divisive elections that we've ever had with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So it's always helpful to sort of consider the document as responding not only to a specific instance or opportunity, but also to a broader social and political context.